Alert Media.
Hello, my fellow Dreadites, and welcome to the Dread Alert podcast. I'm Vince, and today we're joined by a very special guest. Today, I'm joined by Paul Tremblay. Paul has won the Bram Stoker, British Fantasy, and Massachusetts Book Awards, and is the author of Survivor Song, The Cabin at the End of the World, Disappearance at Devil's Rock, A Head Full of Ghosts, among many others, including crime novels and short story collections. His essays and short fiction have appeared in the Los Angeles Times, New York Times, Entertainment Weekly Online, and numerous Year's Best anthologies. Paul has been very generous with his time, and we are really excited to have him here on the podcast, not only because I'm interviewing him, but because I'm also a giant fan of his work. Paul, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Vince. Yeah, very kind. Happy to be here.
So we're going to be talking about your next book, which comes out on July 22nd from Quill Tree Books and HarperCollins, and just a quick thank you to them, and to NetGalley for the advanced copy. This book's called Another, and unlike some of your other work, it's a middle grade and young adult novel. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I don't have an expansive answer for that.
No. What inspired you to tackle middle grade and young adult work?
So I've been for my whole writing life, I've been also like a high school math teacher. And then when the movie Knock at the Cabin was being made, that gave me the opportunity to take a year sabbatical from school. So that was the academic year of 22-23. So what ended up happening was that I finished my adult novel horror movie like 4 months before my deadline, which was great. And so I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? And I happen to have, I don't know, just like hopefully those things that happen to most writers, you just get like this weird random sort of scene or imagery in your head, and which was sort of became the main component of Another anyway. But really quickly, the scene that I just sort of imagined or stumbled upon was this old dude with a burlap sack shows up at a lonely boy's house and says, "Hey, I've got a friend for you." And when he opens the sack, inside is this like clay mannequin sort of boy with no real facial expressions, just like indentations and maybe a nose ridge. But the boy, the clay boy could move and sculpt a smile on his face. So I was like, oh, that's weird. I should do something with that. Um, and it's like, oh, I'm going to write it from the point of view of the 12-year-old. So maybe this is middle grade. I guess the last thing I would say, sorry, this is really rambly, but maybe like a year or two before, a good friend and writer, Mallory O'Meara, said, hey, you have to read Kenneth Oppel's The Nest. It's amazing. It's really scary. I'm sure like you get tons of book recommendations, but she went so as far as to buy me a copy and mail it to me. It's like, oh, I guess I better read it. So for sure, like when I read that book, I was like, oh, I didn't know, like this is really beautifully written and scary. I didn't know like you could do stuff like this with middle grade. So I mean, that was also sort of kicking around the back of my head. Yeah. So I had the time off, the weird scene, and then I wrote Another.
And I want to say, this is not light work here. It's not pandering to middle grade. It's written concisely and clearly, but it's also pretty creepy as well. I don't think you're pulling any punches with this novel.
Well, thank you, Vince. I appreciate it. Sure. I mean, I think, the secret, well, I don't know. The way it's not a secret. The way I approach my writing is like, trying not to talk down to people, like assume your readers are smart no matter what their age is. And I think most readers sort of appreciate both like the honesty, like the emotional honesty of it all. So we'll see how it goes with kids when they read this. I mean, there is no violence. Uh, yeah, but I think it's pretty creepy, but I don't know. I'm a terrible judge of what's creepy.
Well, it seems like you have a ton of experience because you teach middle and high school, so the authenticity feels like it's there. Did you pull any of that from your experience in the classroom?
Yeah, for sure. In a weird way, like such a, strange beginning, as I said, like the very sort of phantasmagoric image of that kid coming out of the clay boy coming out of the sack. It very quickly, once I had to figure out, hey, who is Casey? Why was he so lonely and isolated? And why would he allow this to happen? Not allow it to happen, but why would he be so desperate for friendship that he would try to, become friends with the weird clay thing? Um, yeah, and pretty quickly discovered that, oh, I needed to write about sort of the 2 years of teaching in the teeth of the pandemic.
Hmm.
Now, hopefully, the book is not very didactic about it. I mean, I kind of hope it works as like a little bit of a metaphor. I mean, the pandemic's mentioned, but 95% of the book takes place in Casey's house during a school vacation week. So I really don't hit you over the head with pandemic stuff. But yeah, no, things from like, cyberbullying to, remote learning and hybrid learning, just dealing with, with kids both in my family and at school of that age, yeah, that certainly all informed the book.
Yeah, and I think very, very well. There's a very clear theme, and I want to dive into themes a little bit later in this interview because I think there are a number of extremely interesting themes that this book raises and questions that this book raises that I want to dive into. But I was a big fan of Goosebumps and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark and shows like Are You Afraid of the Dark? As an educator, how important is it that kids are exposed to horror and scary stories when they're in middle and early high school?
That's a great question. I don't know if I've ever thought of it in those terms, that it's important to be exposed to it. I mean, I do think it is in some ways. I mean, I mean, I get it as a parent. Like, there's that line where you're trying to protect your kids from the horrors of the world, but at some point, like, if you're always protecting them, it's just going to be like this horrible, shock. So what's the right age? I mean, honestly, it's a kid by, or person by person basis, honestly. And especially now in the world that we live in, your kids are going to be exposed to pretty awful things. No matter what you do. Like, if they have access to a phone or the internet, or yeah, they're going to see stuff. They're going to hear stuff from other kids. I mean, that's how we learned about it. We didn't have the internet, but there are always older kids hanging around telling us things that we probably shouldn't have been told, or we see something on TV. For me, that was, as a child of the cable television revolution, that was sort of the case for me. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think, if your kid's a reader and he's interested in it, I mean, what better way to be exposed to some of those sort of emotions and feelings than, with the safety of a book, the safety and hope of a book.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mention hope because I find this to be one of the more hopeful pieces, at least of the ones that I've read of yours. And I wondered if that was where the story led you or if that was more intentional for the audience.
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, well, when I started writing the book, I wasn't sure if it was middle grade, but when I got pretty far into it, I hoped it would be. I mean, based on the protagonist. So yeah, for my adult readers, like, yeah, the kid doesn't die at the end, nor does the world blow up or anything like that. But also it was very story specific. That wouldn't have worked for the story.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Is it any more hopeful? I guess. I don't know. Like, I just find that the actual act of writing and having someone read, and as a reader, just even if I'm reading or watching a terribly grim movie, I just find that act hopeful. Like, that communication between reader and uh, reader and writer, or movie watcher and filmmaker. I mean, to me, that's innately hopeful.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I tend to lean towards the bleak in my own personal horror watching habits. I tend to gravitate towards the bleak. And I tend to gravitate towards the ambiguous, which is something I think you do really well with your writing. I think of A Head Full of Ghosts and I think of Horror Movie. And if you haven't read Head Full of Ghosts and Horror Movie, those are two of my favorites from Paul. And I was left wrestling with both of those books for days after I finished reading them, not because of a lack of clarity, but because of well structured ambiguity. And I find this story to be much more clear. And I was wondering if that was more for the reader as well.
Right. Um, I think in some ways, like, young readers could probably handle ambiguity better than adults can, or at least, not have the same tantrum some adult readers have. I say that as a joke, but I'm not joking. I think if you think back to when you were in middle school, or teen or early teen, like, life felt like ambiguity to me. Like, you know, I always, as I'm losing, like, actual memories as I'm getting older and older, I still, maybe it's because I've been teaching for so long, I still feel like I have some sort of lifeline to that emotional life of a young person, especially when, as a young person, that weird combination of dread and excitement for the future, this big scary thing. It's still there as an adult, but it's slightly different. um, it's a slightly different sort of, like, dread and fear and excitement. Maybe less excitement. I don't want to get too bummery.
No, no, I think you're right. I think the responsibility of it as an adult makes it less exciting. The responsibility of managing life through
Yeah,
ambiguity.
it becomes more scary for sure. Yeah. So anyway, if I'm going to use ambiguity, I really try to be careful to not have it be a gimmick. Like, I don't want it to be like a trick. I want it to be, this is at least this is the best way that I think the story should be told. I could be wrong, but I at least have to convince myself, the ambiguity has to be part and parcel of the theme. If the book is scary at all, it's scary precisely because of the ambiguity. So, yeah, this story didn't call for ambiguity, so I wasn't gonna like jam it in there.
Yeah. And I think it's more overtly supernatural than some of the other more ambiguous books, which I found refreshing. Frankly, I think it lent itself to some really interesting themes, and some of those themes that jumped out for me were, like you mentioned before, cyberbullying, but also looking at Morrow as a character, and if you can twist that into bullying, sometimes the victimization that bullies are going through themselves. And I also love the idea of the snake tattoo and tying it in with maybe shedding of skin later in the novel without giving too many spoilers. And it's a hopeful story in the sense that we become who we are through that adversity. And one of the highlights I made when I was reading it is that your parents can't always protect you, and how empowering Casey found that. So, I guess, what would you hope an adult reader, or a kid reader, because I think the message applies even with me, with content creation, with coming into my own. I think all of these apply across the board. What would you hope an audience would think, feel, or perhaps do after completing the book?
Oh, wow. I mean, it's a really good question, but in some ways, like impossible to answer. Like, uh, only because, like, we're talking about the book and you've asked, like, super great questions. I'm just worried that my answers are going to be stupid because, in this book, it took about 6 months. Usually my adults take like a year.
Mm.
It's like, for me, the best way to say what I was trying to say is the book. I mean, to me, that's why I read is, you know, uh, you know, a book communicates a story communicates like emotions that you can't really communicate otherwise, or not communicate as well. Uh, so with that sort of caveat out of the way, I don't know. I mean, it was kind of a fun surprise that the book ended up being such like hopefully a celebration of art, human created art
Mm.
in some ways, and how fundamental that is to both the creator and hopefully, the people that, get to see or experience the art as well. Um, as I'm sitting here, I don't know if any of this is going to be online or video wise, but I'm wearing, uh,
Oh
I don't know if I'm
yeah,
allowed to
heck
swear
yeah.
on this because there's kids here, but
No, no, that's fantastic.
yeah, for the listeners, I'm wearing a fuck AI t-shirt that was drawn by a comic book artist. So yeah.
Yeah, and we wholeheartedly agree with that here. I think there's something that's just definitely tied to the human spirit about art, whether you're creating art or promoting artists like we do here. And I definitely think you hit the nail on the head. This novel is a love letter to art in a lot of ways. I found myself going, he found his voice, he found his heart, and he found them literally through art. And I thought that was just so cleverly done.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I would say really briefly, thanks to my own two children who are very artsy kids. Um, my daughter's a visual artist, just like, similar to Casey. My son is a musician. So yeah, no, I mean, just seeing them, go through what they go through, but, mostly good ways. It's inspiring to see.
We have a sister channel, and it's run by our co host Sarah, and we have a toddler. And Sarah was very interested in what we could expose our toddler to, and she's done a great deal of research, finding content that's spookier for kids from birth to age 17. And Sarah had 3 specific questions she wanted to ask that will maybe play on her channel in short form, but will air on this podcast. She says, "Another is the type of book I would have devoured when I was younger. What books did you like to read when you were young?"
Well, thank you. I'm honored that it worked for her. And man, when we get to this question, I'm always somewhat embarrassed because as a kid, I wasn't a huge reader. Like I really didn't fall in love with reading until my early 20s. However, I was always like the goody two shoes in school, so I would always read the books that are assigned to me. Um, so nothing super scary, but I do remember my mother reminded me like how much I enjoyed like the Encyclopedia Brown stuff. This is, so in the 80s. Certainly read my fair share of choose your own adventure stories as well.
I loved choose your own adventure novels. Those were always a great time. Sarah asks, "There are plenty of creepy scenes in the book. Is there one particular scene that stands out without spoiling the book too much? I know we've talked about one of those scenes, the genesis of the book, but is there anything else that strikes you as one of your favorites?"
Oh, that's a good question. It's funny because I usually say for my adult books, there's always like one or two scenes that I treat as like the carrot at the end of the stick. Like, oh, I can't wait
Mm.
to write this scene. Um, and I don't know if another had that. Like, I mean, which was cool because it was a totally different writing experience. I mean, obviously, I was interested in writing like the scene I described. That happened so early in the book. Usually, the carrot at the end of the stick scene is more later towards the end. I think maybe like one of the one of the last like sleepover night scenes where it really gets uh super creepy or
Yeah.
super horror-y pyrotechnically without there's no actually explosions or anything. I don't know why I said pyrotechnically. Yeah. I don't know. And maybe actually the one thing, like I wasn't looking forward to it, but I was really sort of surprised by Morrow's character, like because I wasn't anticipating sort of what he was going through became something that I would really explore as opposed to him just being a quote unquote villain kind of thing.
Yeah, without spoiling too much and without being too punny, I think Morrill develops nicely along the course of this novel. And I was torn. I was of two minds about him. By the end of it, he really grew on me. And the scene you're mentioning, it's very spiderwebby and very much so stands out as a high point in the book for sure. We have one more question from Sarah. It's, did you find your writing process different from this book, considering it was meant for a young audience? We've touched on this a bit, but if there's anything else you'd like to elaborate on.
I mean, the short version is no, not really. Like I really did not approach the writing any different than I would have, with the exception of, there's no swearing. I tried to slip in one, but the editor was like, you probably should take it out. It's like, that's fine. Um, but no, I mean, I, sat at the same spot. Like I took notes like I normally do. I didn't pre-plot this one out, but that's sort of been the way I've been going for the last like 3 or 4 books. Normally, like my thing is I'm going to write it and let other people figure out what to do with it. At some point I thought this could be a middle grade or younger reader book, but I wasn't sure. And if it wasn't, we were going to publish it as an adult novel. I was like, fine, just give it to my agent and publisher and let them figure it out. Which is sort of a privileged thing to say, but I'm super lucky to have the team that I have.
Yeah, and I think that's the uncompromising artist point of view. You do the work as the work. And again, it speaks to the recommendation we're making on the channel, which is, if you're an adult reader or if you have kids in this age range, it would be a lovely book to read alongside them. And I think you'd get a lot out of it. I found it very empowering, and it's a recommendation that I stand by, that it could be for either age group, the kids and the kids at heart.
I think so, for sure. I mean, I don't know if this happens to you, but like, especially people my age, I won't age you, but like, Gen Xers, especially, like you hear them talk about all the time. What was their introduction to horror? It was usually reading Stephen King at an absurdly young age
Mhm.
when they shouldn't have been. Um, I mean, that part of it was definitely in the back of my head. Not that I was writing something inappropriate for kids, but I was like, oh no, like 8 to 12-year-olds, middle schoolers, they can handle. It depends on the kid.
Yep.
It's a kid by kid, person by person basis. They'll know if they can handle it or not, I think, especially when it comes to a book. I mean, it's a little
Yeah.
bit different when it's a more visceral, instant video sort of format. I mean, that's a little bit different. But if it's a book, I mean, you have you have the time and the sort of control. You can kind of control the story in your own head too, which I think is part of the fun of being like a new reader or a young reader too, I think.
So I have a couple more questions for you. Some we ask all our guests, some just for you. But in honor of another, what is your favorite doppelganger story? Book, movie, TV show? What's your favorite doppelganger story?
Oh no. I say, oh no, I'm so bad at thinking on the spot like that.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
I guess if it Oh, I'm so stupid. Yes, one of my all-time favorite movies, Lake Mungo, Australian film. I think
Yes,
that definitely qualifies as a doppelganger movie. Uh,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. We just covered Late Night with the Devil on the podcast, and when this airs, it'll be a few weeks ago that we covered it. But as of the time of this recording, it was just this week that we released it. And so I'm in sort of an Australian horror headspace. I really love Lake Mungo. It's interesting to me that they have sort of a cultural aversion to horror whenever they're producing such good horror movies.
yeah.
Uh,
No, and
yeah,
it's been really cool to see just in the past 10 years, like that movie just continue to build an audience and and have champions. I know like Mike Flanagan has talked about the movie quite a bit, and I got to, it was a supreme honor. There's an outfit in Australia who are doing like a big fancy sort of uh, Blu-ray DVD with the making of and commentary. And they asked me on to talk about the movie, which was amazing.
you name dropped Buffy the Vampire Slayer as well, and I was excited to see that, the episode Doppelgangland. And Sarah's doing a Buffy rewatch on her channel, and I'm a diehard Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. So when I read that, I was like, as if I didn't know it already, but I was like, this dude is the real deal.
Thank you, but I have to admit I have never watched Buffy. I mean, so that clearly came from like when I was researching doppelgangers, like Casey was.
That's
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, I don't know. I mean, everyone's busy. so this feels like a lame excuse, but also between teaching and writing and being a parent and trying to read all the books that I can, like TV is sort of the thing that not doesn't fall by the wayside, but I don't get to watch as much as I would want to watch.
I've watched significantly less TV since we started this channel. When you're busy with 1,000 other things, long-form storytelling can definitely fall by the wayside, so no shame there. Here's the next question we ask everybody who comes on the show. What is your favorite all-time horror movie? You could pick a few. You don't have to pick just one. That's a loaded question.
Well, I mean, I guess my top three, we've already mentioned one, like Mungo is usually the deeper cut. I think that the top two are probably, the favorite movies of very many people, but Jaws, with its 50th anniversary this summer is definitely one of them. It's probably the movie I've watched the most, even though I still cover my eyes when Quint gets attacked, because it so scarred me when I saw it when I was 10. And The Thing.
Also recently had an anniversary.
Yes, right. And I've probably seen that the second most of all time. But man,
Yeah.
the thing is, I mean, both those movies are just such great movies. I think even like non-horror fans would enjoy it. If I can use my son as a as a test subject because he's not a huge horror guy, but he loves The Thing, Jaws.
I'll throw The Thing in there as a doppelganger movie as well.
You're right. It could absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
That's fantastic. We're on brand today. My standard question to wrap up the interview is, what are you working on next? I know you had some exciting news. I don't know how much you can tell us, but if you want to share what you're up to next.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, I mean, before I forget, you mentioned horror movie, and the paperback is coming out August 5th. Um, and they've made it like a really beautiful physical object. It's got like some really cool sprayed edges with like film on the side, and which I don't know if they normally do for paperback. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, so you're referencing we just sort of announced that I signed a new 3-book deal with William Morrow. And so the book that'll be coming out hopefully next summer is called Dead But Dreaming of Electric Sheep. Um, it sort of does riff on horror and science fiction, a little bit of AI. I guess the main conceit is that, although a lot of this happens off screen, but there's a guy who's sort of like my age, works for unnamed tech giant. um, and when he's on campus, he has a massive stroke. He doesn't die, but he's like in a vegetative state. And the tech company, because apparently the dude signed his body away to them, like, yes, you can do what you want with me if something were to happen. Put AI nanotechnology into his brain um, so that he can be remote controlled, almost like in a video game. And they hired this young 24-year-old woman to sort of basically weekend at Bernie him across the country. So I hope a big chunk of the book is actually kind of funny. So like from her point of view, it's her controlling, the dude. But the other half of the book is this man, of course, has some sort of consciousness, and he's basically going through hell, a vivid, phantasmagorical hell as he's being transported. And so the two sort of narratives. I'm so bad at the pitch, but
No,
yeah. So
sign me up.
the book sort of goes back and forth between those two narratives and into a suitably horrific adult Tremblay ending.
Sign me up. This sounds fantastic. And the Philip K. Dick reference is not lost on me. For those of you interested in Blade Runner, the novel it's based on is called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, it's a great book. And definitely check out Horror Movie. If you don't already have the hardcover with the red edging around it, the paperback with the red edges sounds fantastic. You won't be disappointed. I stand by this book so hard.
Thank you.
Now, we know what you're working on next, but I also know you have a pretty active mailing list. So where can people find you if they want to know what you're working on and what to keep their eyes peeled for?
Sure. I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram. Those are the two things I check now. I don't check the Twitter anymore since you know who took over. Um, but it's at Paul G. Tremblay, the handle for both, I think.
Excellent.
And I have a newsletter. If you go to my website, paultremblay.net, it's free. It's usually once a month, sometimes longer. So it's not too obnoxious.
Paul, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here with us today. Hopefully you all get to check out the book when it's released on July 22nd and keep your eyes out for the next one. Thanks again, Paul. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Vince. I appreciate it.